where dreams collide. High road roaring every night. Spotlight on Spurs, feel the fight. Spotlight on Spurs, hearts ablaze through the cheers and cloudy days. From the lane to glory's flight. Spotlight on Spurs, shine so bright. Echoes rise when we take the field. This is passion, nothing concealed. Through the tackles, joy ignites. Spotlight on Spurs, burning lights. Feel the tempo, sweet and wild. London's warriors never mild. Every challenge we endure. Spotlight on Spurs, loud and pure.
What's up, guys, and welcome back, hopefully, for some of you to Spotlight on Spurs. Big announcement that's just literally come in. It looks like Spurs may be finally getting that monster six that this fan base have been crying out for. It looks like Palhinha may be on his way. Reports suggest that it's no buy, mandatory buy option, but potentially a buy option. So obviously that does sit in the hands of Spurs to trigger that, which will be, I'm sure some of the fan base will be happy. I'm sure some of them will be miserable because that's what Spurs do. I'm actually part of the latter. So let's have the conversation about it anyway. Joining me, returning to the show once again, is Mr. Alex Barker. How are you doing, sir? Thank you very, very much for coming back on.
Oh, thank you for having me on. I'm doing very well. For non-footballing reasons completely, I've spent the evening watching the Battlefield 6 reveal, and I'm extremely excited for that game to come out later this year. So that's basically what I've been doing this since 7 o'clock. It's been great.
Mate, it's gaming, football. That is the life. Chilling out, listening to football, watching the game, playing the gaming. What more can you ask for? But you're here to talk Spurs for the chat, for me, and for the whole of Tottenham fan base. We're here to talk Spurs and the signings and the players that are going to improve the 11. Obviously, we did have you on. You was very, very kind and came on 6 weeks ago, I think it was now. Very early start of the window. We went through a variety of things, variety of signings that Spurs should be making, etc. So just a little bit for anyone that hasn't seen the video, guys. Chat are very much involved in this. What we will do at the end is, if there's any players that you guys suggest that you think we should be signing, or if you just want a bit more information on, say, pop them in the comment section, and then at the end, myself and Alex, you probably care more about Alex's views, but myself and Alex will decide whether it's a player we like, whether it's a player we don't, should Spurs be signing, etc. I've also got some names as well that we'll be throwing out, but on top of that, as I said, the last one that we did do is the first most viewed live stream we've ever had on the channel. So that was hugely, hugely successful. And bearing in mind the day that we were supposed to go live, which is our regular day of Thursdays, StreamYard just did not allow us to. So we were sat in the back office all having a chat, trying to go live for about 20 minutes, and it didn't work. So we ended up going live on a Monday, which was completely out of sync with what we normally do. And yet it still hit the third most viewed live stream that we've ever done. So hopefully today will be of similar numbers. When we had the last show, we spoke about having a roughly, I think it was 150 million. And we said 3 players, but you managed to sneak in a fourth. You managed to get 4 players in for that price. One of them was our new signing, Kudus. So you've obviously predicted who we should sign. So we're going to go with your ratio being 1 in 4 of the next ones that you bring up. 1 in 4 of these guys will be signed by Spurs, because that's how it's worked in previous videos. Just give us a little bit of a reasoning, as I'm sure most of the Spurs fans have seen Kudus play, and what we think he's going to bring. But what was the reason in particular that you thought this would be a good buy? You was a little bit skeptical yourself, being the West Ham connection, wasn't you?
Yeah, I was surprised that there was such a lack of animosity. I guess it's because West Ham have been so bad recently, and Kudus is still a relatively new player, and I don't think he's attached to any of their super memories. I think if Lucas Paqueta, for example, if it was him moving, that might go down a lot worse because he was part of the UEFA Conference League win, whereas Kudus arrived in the summer after that. So he's tied to the demise of Moyes, the flat line of Lopetegui, and the weak start of Graham Potter. So maybe that's been why he's able to leave easily. But yeah, in terms of what I'd like to move to Spurs, I think it's clearly probably needed like an additional like right winger in particular, but like a versatile forward. And Frank, I think something that's going to be interesting following this season is how fast Spurs tend to attack. I think Thomas Frank's answer against low blocks, against teams of a much weaker quality who don't want to give up chances. Frank's solution, I think, is going to be we're going to hit teams incredibly quickly and hard. We're going to play quite risky football. And in order to do that, we need players who are capable of holding the ball, controlling it under pressure, and bombing forward very quickly and making our game faster. So that was the reason I liked Kudus, because he's a very fast player. He's very strong as well for his size, and like a very direct one as well. So I think he suited that sort of directish, wide forward that I think Thomas Frank will really enjoy.
Yeah, and he's brought a lot to Spurs already in the short amount of games that he's played. Very direct, as you said, very good at one-on-one situations. He's got pace that we've been definitely wanting and needing. So Spurs fans on the whole have been quite impressed. And going back to your point on the West Ham situation, what was really, really strange about that was there was a lot of West Ham fans that said he was incredibly frustrating in terms of sometimes he is very, very good, and then other times he's been very, very poor. And I think that was part of the reason why everybody was kind of like, why is this? Why is he so? Why is it not working for him? Why is it working sometimes? That sort of thing. So I think that's one of the reasons why I've just had a note to say for some reason the comments are not working. So I'm just going to try and work on that in the background. I'm not quite sure why that is. But I think that was part of the problem, is that there were I've got a lot of West Ham mates. I live in that area. I spoke to a lot of them, and some of them were going, we don't even care. We literally do not care that we're losing him. I think Jared Bowen is on the right-hand side for them. So potentially he wasn't being played as in his favoured position. So maybe, I mean, the numbers signify that it wasn't his best season. I think he had a good first season, second season not so good, and maybe that's a reason. Maybe that's a reason for it. But as I said, it's exactly what Spurs are missing. Spurs have been really, really needing that sort of winger, and it's been part of the problem that we've had in terms of all of the wingers that we've got, but yet none of them are able to deliver to the level that he seems to be. Obviously, is very short. The three other players that you named, one of them is either done or on the verge of signing for PSG, and the goalkeeper, and that's obviously the discussion we had about Vicario. Chevalier, is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, that's close.
I'm close. I'm happy with that. So again, if you just want to go into a little bit of why you thought he would work with Spurs.
Yeah, I think this came down to what we spoke at the time, didn't we, about how a lot of Tottenham fans think that Tottenham need a goalkeeper, and it seems like the conversation has died down. I went with Chevalier just because I think what you need is like a very strong ball-playing goalkeeper, and also like a good shot stopper as well, and someone who could command the box. Chevalier is actually a weaker point on that part, but he's improving. But to be honest, I think it comes down to two things why I don't think we're seeing the conversation come out about goalkeepers at the moment. The first one being Kinski. I think a lot of Tottenham fans feel quite confident in him, and maybe him being able to step up. Also, I mean, that is a nice time to say, nice time to talk about, especially while you start your comments as well. I can ramble on them. Oh, good stuff. I'll ramble on about this briefly. Look, I think it's interesting how Tottenham fans and I think wider football fans were talking about we need a ball playing goalkeeper. We need someone really good on the ball. Vicario is not good enough. And I kind of feel like we're shifting away in modern football from needing ball playing goalkeepers. You look at Liverpool, they've got Mamardashvili, who's going to replace Alisson. Mamardashvili is a world-class shot stopper, but horrendous on the ball. I've exaggerated a bit there, but just like relative to his world-class shot stopping, like it's just a massive drop off to what he's technically like on the ball. At least he was a year ago. He might have improved a bit. Man City replacing Ederson with James Trafford. Trafford is pretty good on the ball, but he's nowhere near Ederson standards. Again, I think that's like, we just want a good shot stopper there. And PSG, they're replacing Donnarumma Chevalier, which goes counter to this narrative. But if Donnarumma gets signed by Man United or Chelsea, again, that's another really poor goalkeeper on the ball who's a world-class shot stopper that's getting signed. So I think just in general, goalkeepers who are good on the ball becoming less important. I think that we're swinging back in modern football now to just shot stopping being the number one priority.
Yeah, and that's kind of the goalkeeper that Vicario is, to be honest with you. Again, I think we discussed it on the show previously that Vicario had very much been a goalkeeper that was just asked to be a goalkeeper. There was no passing out from the back, etc., from the teams that he played for. And he even come out and said in interviews that the way that we wanted him to play was very different to what he was used to. So if that's the case, and I think with Thomas Frank it's a bit of a strange one, because again, we said it, the last two goalkeepers that he had at Brentford was Raya, and then obviously I forgot the guy's name now, but he's just gone on to Dortmund, Flecken. I think it is Flecken, that's it, yeah, Flecken. So both play with their feet quite regularly and are quite decent with specifically the short passing game. They're quite confident on the ball. So it's a bit of a strange one with Vicario, understanding what his requirements will be from Frank. Is it going to be a case of getting the ball, being better with the long kicking, if you like, or the short kicking, or is it just a case of just be a goalkeeper and let the defenders and the midfielders pick up the slack? So I definitely think if you've got a goalkeeper, it seemed to be everyone was going the same way, and then as you said, now it seems to be split up a little bit more. So let's see with that. I think with regards to Vicario within the Spurs fan base particularly, could definitely say that he's a goalkeeper that splits opinions. There are a lot that say, yes, he's very, very good at this, but actually he's not good at some of the basics, i.e. being very, very loud and proud in his box. He seems to be very loud when the ball's not in play and he's screaming and shouting, but actually when he's coming out for crosses, etc., he's not the most commanding of goalkeepers. So I definitely think that that's a position that we will look to strengthen, maybe not this summer, but potentially in the coming summers. Another player that you selected, which I 100% agree with, which is off for two reasons. One being that Palhinha looks like we're close on that, but the other one is he signed a new contract, was Boubacar Kamara. Now, what a player he would have been for Spurs. Literally, for me, probably starts for most teams in the Premier League. You was quite a high rated of him. Are you in agreement on that?
Yeah, it was a big coup for Aston Villa. They managed to sign him down, especially when they still got Amadou Onana at the club.
Yeah.
So you got like two of the best defensive midfielders in the league, and in some way, Villa are quite tight on PSR. I think they've done well to keep them both. There's not much to say on that. It's unlucky Spurs have missed out. Probably would have been really good for them.
I generally believed, big up beats to TH. I generally believed that there was a realistic option. I think I said it again on previous that I thought we had no chance because of the league positions. Then they fell out of the Champions League, and I was like, actually, with PSR and everything, if we could get him in, it would be a very, very good coup. But obviously, he signed a new contract, so that's dead in the water now. And then the last one, I believe, is the only player that either hasn't been linked or moved or everything else, is Hakan Haraldsson. Now, I can't pretend. Is that completely wrong? Have I butchered that?
No. You've nailed it. Right, I'm just laughing. I suggested him. Are
you going against that now? Is that it was a little bit in your defence? It was very much. This is a bit of an out there sort of one. So yeah, are you going against it now?
No, I'm not necessarily going against it. It's just at the time, like Tottenham had been linked to nobody when we recorded. So yeah, the fact they've gone for like Gibbs White. It's like, okay, so they're thinking a very different ballpark of like how much we're willing to spend on a number 10 than Haraldsson is at Lille. He's a young project, I'd say, could potentially be a really nice player going forward. And Gibbs White is like, yeah, we're buying him to win now, basically. So it's clear just Tottenham are thinking in higher value in that position. Yeah.
No, and to be honest with you, I think especially when the first video came out, I don't think any Spurs fans were expecting us to go and sign these sorts of players. So I completely agree with you on that one. One thing you did bring up, which I'm sure Spurs fans would be delighted to to hear again was the best player that you've ever seen live was Mikey Moore. Reports now quite strongly is that A, he's going to sign a new contract at Spurs, and then B, that's going to be followed by a loan move to Rangers. No buy option, anything like that, just a basic loan. What are your thoughts on that move?
Yeah, Rangers. So I do a bit of football content. On and again, off again for 20-minute Tims. They're a Celtic channel. So I've got a bit of weirdly good understanding of Scottish football, and quite often I'll go on that channel to analyze Rangers for them. And Rangers have been rubbish for like the last 3 years, playing really. Where Celtic tried to play quite nice, attractive football, Rangers tend to devolve into quite physical, kick it long ball. So Russell Martin has gone there, which should be a statement of intent to change that. But I still don't really trust anything that happens at Rangers, like players to go there and thrive. So I'm a little nervous for Moore, but like I said, and like I've said before, he's of the very few games I've been to, I will say it's probably like 10 to 20. Mikey Moore is the most talented player I've seen live, or the best player I've seen live. Certainly best performance. So yeah, it's got a lot of faith in him. Hoping he can sort of turn it around, turn the spell around at Rangers, let's say.
Yeah, so obviously I'm not going to pretend I know a huge amount of Scottish football, but when it was announced, my opinion of it was that my expectation of Rangers will be that they're one of the better teams in the league, would probably therefore dominate a bit of possession and potentially play against quite a few low blocks. And if that is the case, which you might tell me that it's not the case, then that could stand him in good stead in terms of that's what he probably will be doing at Spurs, especially if he goes on to be the player we're hoping him to be. He'll be coming up against the defensive teams that will be in low blocks, and it will be up to him to try and sprinkle a bit of magic, I guess, and make things happen. So I was saying that I would almost prefer him to go to a team that kind of dominates games and is the better team playing against low blocks than, for instance, going and competing. I don't think it'll happen, but let's say a lower Premier League team comes in where he's spending 90% of the game defending and everything else. I don't really feel like it's a learning curve. So I feel, as I said, going to a better team that's higher up the table should therefore probably give him a bit of better experience of what he will likely come into at Spurs.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point. That's a really strong argument. Yeah, to be honest, I think I agree as well. I think that's better than going to a lower rated team. It's just like my trepidation just comes from not necessarily more, just you're spot on. Rangers do face a lot of low blocks. Teams in Scotland, unless they're called Celtic, will just say we're sitting deep here. We're not going to press you. The thing between Rangers and Celtic is Rangers don't often have any idea how to break down these blocks. So if anything, there might be an overburden on Mikey Moore to come up with magic, but that is actually probably a good preparation for moving back to Tottenham. So good argument.
It will definitely be interesting to see how he gets on. I will try and reach out to some Rangers channels to see if we can get some regular videos just on updates on how he's done, like I do with all of the loan players. But yeah, personally, I'm hoping that it turns out to be a good loan, because Spurs have predominantly been quite poor with their loan system and loaning players, with the exception of last year, which was quite successful. So let's see how he does get on. Another thing that was mentioned on the previous pod, and we come in towards the end of what we mentioned previously, is almost just an overview of what was said. You did mention that you felt that there's a possibility Frank would play fullbacks, play centre backs as fullbacks. Obviously, perfect example of this would have been a Mickey van der Ven. Probably not at this moment in time because Spurs are so weak on the left-hand side of the defence anyway. But what we've seen, particularly, I don't know whether you've seen any pre-season games, but what we've seen, or what we feel like we've seen, is that one of the fullbacks has definitely become a third centre half in the build-up. Whether that be, and we're kind of going to go on to what we think who may benefit most from this sort of setup. But it kind of leads into exactly what you were saying. Van der Ven I was very sceptical whether Van der Ven would be a fullback in Frank's system because of his hamstrings. Essentially, is the be all and end all. However, if it's a defensive fullback, if you like, then he would be almost perfect for that role. He's at the pace. He's obviously is a centre half, so can come in. So you obviously wasn't surprised, I'm guessing, that these are the tactics that he's employed.
Yeah. I guess so. It's been a while since I spoke about it, and I'm planning to binge all the pre-season games from all the top 6 clubs going forwards. So
Okay.
I've caught bits and bobs. I was looking over my colleague Dom's shoulder, who's a very big Tottenham fan, as he's watching you guys beat a very bad Arsenal team, if I do say so. So yeah, Van der Ven, in terms of actually suiting it, I think you're right. Van der Ven does make a lot of sense. So that on the nervousness about him getting injured, I will say. I think it's something you've probably mentioned anyway, but there is going to be a big difference between Postecoglou and Frank. Even if Van der Ven was asked to get up and down, it should be, in theory, not as strenuous as it was under Ange. Should be a bit nicer to his hamstrings. Especially as a third centre back, because the left back just kind of staying deep, which should be quite nice for him.
Yeah, as I say, I definitely agree with you. A lot of the pressures that were put on injuries, for instance, there was a piece that Ange had to take for that. However, I think he has had previous hamstring injuries at other clubs as well. So, and Spurs are just renowned for having injured players constantly. So every single time I see him hunch over, I'm like, oh, he's done it again. Oh my God. And I'm sure there'll be Spurs fans in the chat that will be agreeing with me on that. I'm sure I'm not the only one. Last little bit just from the last appearance that we had 6 weeks ago. Expectation for you, obviously, you was very much. We had no signings. We had no idea what was going on. 7th to 8th was roughly the expectation that you had. I think most Spurs fans would probably agree. Maybe if we sign a few more Kudus level players, maybe that will come up. But 7th or 8th, is that still roughly where you think, especially with what other clubs have been doing?
Might bump you up a bit. I don't think you get top 4. I think the Premier League colleague John, friend, I should rather say John McKenzie, spoke about this recently to me. I think a theory I agree with. There's a bit of a top 4 Galacticos in the Premier League at the moment. Chelsea, Liverpool, City, and Arsenal all spending lots of money on already really good squads. Yeah. With managers as well, like Maresca going into his second season, Arsenal going into his second season too. Basically seeing how good Arteta is that next season with Arsenal. But I mean, it's very clear to me. It's very clear those 4 teams are going to be quite ahead. Newcastle look a bit shambolic at the moment. So I think it very much is a top 4 and then the chasing pack, and maybe that gives you Tottenham an opportunity to nab a 5th or a 6th finish. Mm-hmm. I think I did a Premier League prediction recently. It's pending. I wouldn't finalise it until the start of the season, or really the end of the transfer window, ideally for me. I think I had Tottenham 6th in that and Newcastle 5th, but that was also before Alexander Isak said he wanted to leave. So they might be falling quite further down.
It definitely feels like them 4 are in a league of their own. As you said, with some of the signings that they're making, it's just absolutely ridiculous. And then what's been the conversation amongst the Spurs fan base particularly is that a lot of people are saying that we need to get to we need to have the same level of transfer window as these guys. And we'll know we're 13 places below them. So if you have the same transfer market as them, you're not actually gaining any ground. You need to better them. And obviously you're not going to in some of the signings that they're making. So Newcastle are in a real, I thought this would almost be like a springboard for them. Obviously got their first trophy over the line. They picked up Champions League again. I thought this could be almost the summer where they really start going on, because when you look at a lot of their players, they've got a lot of top players. And if they lose Isak, then they really, really could be in a bit of trouble. But so could Spurs if we don't make some more signings. Obviously, Gibbs White was the one that we thought was going to get over the line. Since your last appearance, we have brought in Vuskovic has obviously completed that move, and he's now came in. We brought Takai in, who nobody's seen anything of because he's again picked up an injury, typical Spurs. Danzo's deal has been made permanent. Tell's deal has been made permanent, and then obviously we brought in Kudus. What are your kind of thoughts around that as a transfer window so far for Spurs?
Yes, it's a good start, but I think it's weird. I don't think Spurs have obvious holes in their team necessarily. I think you're in a decent position to compete for top 8. It's one of those where if that's the sort of level you want to aim for, I think you only need one or two more signings. But I think you're like a window or two away from challenging the top four seriously. Then again, it also comes down to how good Frank is, and how good his team is next season. Like we've seen what happened with Nuno before at the club. I don't think Frank will be like that, but you never know these things. So recently I've been watching a lot of Marseille and a lot of Como. I've been doing full season reviews of them, so bulk watching their seasons. Roberto De Zerbi at Marseille in his first season, Fabregas in his first season at Como, and something like that's common across both those managers, which might be the same for Frank, is there are players you think are going to work out for them. In the case of Marseille, they signed quite a few players, such as Ilo Wahi, to play striker, be their new number 9. And within the first 2 games, it becomes very clear that he's just a bad fit for what the coach is actually trying to do. Like, when it plays out in a competitive game, it's not working. So there are players at Tottenham that might be the case for. I think the last time we spoke about Odobert, I was a bit worried about him. Seems like he's having a strong preseason, so maybe it works out for him. But maybe there are other players where they don't seem to gel with what Thomas Frank wants to do, and then you're a squad that actually looks good at the moment might suddenly look like, oh, we now need to plug this hole, and this hole.
Yeah, I completely agree. And actually, the next segment I was going to go into is winners and losers in Frank's teams and tactics. So I'm going to butcher this name. I apologize. Anatida. We are going to add that to the section a bit later on where we put together some names and we fire them at Alex and we find out whether or not we think they're going to be good fits or not. So I'll keep this comment up and I'll save that one for later. So in terms of the winners and the losers, one of them I've put in. So we're going to start just with the losers at first. And the first one is more so because of the new signing, but Brennan Johnson, I know that he was a player that obviously was linked, Frank was linked to, Frank wanted at Brentford, and he's obviously was Spurs' top goal scorer last year, but it very much felt that, again, I think we probably went over this, it very much felt that Ange's tactics were not suited around getting the best out of Brennan Johnson, but all of the tactics allowed us to get the very best out of him. I'm sure he didn't come in and go, let's all put all of our tactics around the Brennan Johnson type, but that seemed to be the way that it worked. I'm a bit fearful for Brennan. I think that him coming off of the bench, because Kudus is probably going to be the number 1 in that position, I think is a good option. However, last year he really, really struggled and all he really brought was goals. And if he, for whatever reason, if he's not playing as many games, he's probably not going to score as many. He could be quite a bit of a loser, really, for me in this sort of formation and setup. What would be your thoughts around Brennan Johnson?
I wouldn't be super negative straight away. I mean, Brennan Johnson is like a really weird player. But as I said, Frank really liked him before. And in these situations, sometimes a new signing gives another player a push. And Brennan Johnson, how old is he? I'm going to guess like 24. I've got a Tottenham squad near me, but I'd imagine he is about that age. Yeah, bang on, actually. 24, there we go. So he's still quite young. He's not very young for a winger, but there's still a lot of time on his side, and maybe Kudus gives him a bit of a push there to improve in certain areas. So I wouldn't write him off yet per se. I feel like in that position, there should be opportunities for rotation, especially with Champions League football.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I completely agree. Again, when I'm saying this, these are very much these are more forward-thinking sort of stuff. It's just I'm not saying that they're going to get any worse. And I think actually we may have covered it ever so slightly before again with Mickey van der Ven, because a lot of the tactics that were put in place by Ange were very much high line. His pace was absolutely pivotal to it, and you could very much see it, that there were so many times where a ball was played over the top, and you could tell that a striker had no confidence that they were going to get on the end of it and they were going to do anything because of Van der Ven. Where he seemed to have struggled a little bit more is when he's more set in his way and then he's coming up, say, against a bit of a nimble sort of player. So I'm not saying that Van der Ven's going to have a bad season or won't be first choice or anything like that, but are we going to be playing as much to his strengths as we was under the previous regime? My guess is probably not. And I think you spoke about it briefly, but then a caveated saying that you did like Van der Ven and think that he would be able to deal with the change in tactics.
Yeah, I still think that. I think Van der Ven, again, is another young quality player, youngish player. So
Yep.
I think you bang on there. Like his best asset is pace. So when you rob him of the ability to use that to nullify attacks, then it's it's taking away one of your best weapons. Again, I think this all depends as well on Frank's approach. I think maybe we're all presuming he'll be someone who's more happy to sit in. Maybe he will want to press high. I think you class Van de Ven as like a preventative defender. He is someone who prevents attacks from forming, and not someone who defends attacks that are formed. Let's say, like when he's in the box and having to box defend. Where I guess Romero can kind of do both very, very well. So, yeah, it depends what happens going forward, Frank's approach. But we will say as well, like, I kind of trust Thomas Frank if he can make menaces out of Ethan Pinnock. I'm sure he can do the same out of Van de Ven in a low block.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it, isn't it? These are all kind of hypotheticals at this moment, because sometimes players can't just adapt to that level up. It might be that Frank struggles to adapt to speaking to these higher level players and trying to, I don't know, get them to understand tactics, whatever it may be. And then the last one, and again, I think we kind of already covered it. Vicario could potentially be a player that could win but could lose, in terms of if we do go to we just want our goalkeeper to save shots, he could end up being better. He could end up improving his sort of stature at the club, specifically for the fan base. However, if Frank decides that he wants to follow in the Flecken and the Raya sort of mould, then it could mean that Vicario's days are coming to an end already. So that was the other one. I don't know whether you want to briefly just quickly touch on that, and then we'll move on to who we think are going to be the winners from the system.
Yeah, Vicario's another one. All these a jury out. Vicario, I think I do like a bit more than the average Spurs fan. And again, it really speaks to his Tottenham squad. He's another youngish player for his profile. He's only 28 years old. That's quite young for a keeper. So he should be 2-3 years away from his prime. But at the same time, you feel like if you needed to get rid of him next summer, you probably could still reclaim quite a bit of value on him. So yeah, it's a safe. You're in a safe situation. If he doesn't work out, you've got Kinski, and Kinski's very young, but I really like the look of him too.
Yeah, Adrian, we're going to come to that section at the end. We're going to speak about a few different players, and we will bring up a couple of them mentioned. So we're not going to talk about them just yet. Winners. So obviously there has been some pre-season games that have not been the best, shall we say. Today's one was slightly better, ever so slightly better. When you go and beat Arsenal, it's always a good day. But it got me thinking about who might really, really benefit from this system. And there's been a lot of negative press, I guess, if you like, pushed at Pape Sarr. And I've been saying that actually I think Frank could really work with this player, especially and we discussed it about the big games in your Champions League games where you're away from home, and very much the Europa League final sort of performance, just getting in and around, becoming a bit of a nightmare. And I felt that Sarr could end up being quite a good, not a starter or anything like that, but could be a good squad player for Frank. You actually picked him, and we'll go through that. You probably don't remember. You picked him in your first 11 for Frank, and when I looked at the first 11, it was very similar to the team that played today. So yeah, again, it looks like you've got it pretty accurate on there. Do you agree Sarr's a sort of player that Frank could level up, if you like?
I know. What's the negative press around him?
It's one of them that he's okay from what people see. They think he's okay at a lot of stuff, but his main attribute is the thing that's being labelled at this moment in time with Spurs, particularly because Ange Postecoglou's tactics were very fitness based and very power, like running power, etc. Is whenever you describe a lot of our players, some of the first things you mention is pace, power, their ability to run, the stamina, which some fans are saying has nothing to do with football. I disagree with that to some degree, because if you can't run at all, then you have to be some player to not have to run. But they're the sort of things that when you talk about Sarr, some of the main things you say is his running power, his stamina, his ability to get around the pitch. I think he's better technically than Spurs fans give him credit for. And I think that, like all of our midfielders, they've struggled without having a leader in that position with them to kind of guide them a little bit. But I think he could be not a star, but I think he could be a really impactful squad player at Spurs. But that's the kind of the conversations that I had within the Spurs fan base.
Yeah, I've not seen anything to put me off him, to be honest. I feel like that's the sort of player who's gone through that classic cycle of youngsters where he gets quite underrated. He's putting in really good performances. Then people start to rate him, and then maybe people start to overrate him, and then people recognise that and think he's really bad. And I'm very surprised that Spurs fans are against him, to be honest. I think he's been very good the last 2 years. So I mean, if it's the last 6 months where he's been bad, well, guess what? Most of your team were as well. So yeah, I mean, I still don't see why he couldn't become a star.
Yeah, no, I do agree. As I say, there has been some occasions where he's looked completely devoid of any confidence, but as you've said, that has happened to pretty much most of the players over a period of time. And as I said, I think that a lot of them players in the midfield, they need a leader. They need someone to be able to talk to them. Sarr, Bergvall, Gray, they're all young, and I think they just need a little bit of guiding through games at times. And I think that with the potential announcement of Palhinha coming in, that's an experienced pro. He's obviously played at Bayern, he played at top clubs, he's played in the Premier League. He's got experience. He's obviously 30 now, I think. So it could end up being a really good foil for him. But yeah, as I say, Sarr today I think was getting around the pitch very well. He's got a great goal, and I do think he could be a good option. And the other two that I think could end up being, and I might be going very, very early on this. I think Porro could end up having an unbelievable season under Frank, and the reason for that is I think actually both of his defensive tactics could so positively influence Porro. So as I said earlier, we seem to be playing where we've got fullbacks and one of them will go forward and one of them will come inside. Now Porro's passing range is absolutely incredible, and if we have players like we don't have it at this moment, but if we was to have players like an Anthony Gordon, for instance, who's on Son in his prime, kind of on the last man, trying to make that inside run from the left channel, Porro's ball striking and his ability to pass the ball long is absolutely incredible, and we've seen it a few occasions last season. And I think if the left back is the one that goes forward and he's the one that drops in, which did happen on a couple of the friendlies, I think his ability to unlock a defence with them sorts of runs could be crucial. If we play, say, a Mickey van der Ven and he's the one that drops in and Porro is the one that's asked to get to the byline with Kudus kind of coming inside, again, his crossing ability and passing ability is very, very good. So I feel like either tactic could end up playing into the hands of what sort of footballer Porro is. Is there any kind of feedback on that? Do you agree, disagree?
Yeah, that's a really good way of looking at it. And I think hit a nail on the head, actually. In quite nuanced ways as well, because you're right. I think if he sits back in the back three, then yeah, you get quite a nice passing range from him, both down the switch, which I think you're talking about on the left side, but also down the right as well, just clipped balls into the channel. If he can weight them well, that's going to be really useful. And as well, that could work by pushing Van der Ven forward. Let's say you're playing Van der Ven as a left back. If you're going to play him as the more attacking left back, might sound crazy on paper, but you effectively get a wide target man there, which is what Inter Milan do. So you can use Pedro Porro to play those switches to Van der Ven, win knockdowns, and then Spurs can go from back to front really quickly. And yeah, as you say, when he pushes forward, Porro is also like his wing back days at Sporting, a good crosser and quite nice in those areas too. So that's a really nice point.
When you just spoke about that cross build, like target man on the left hand side, I just got Mandzukic. That's all I can imagine. Just Mandzukic on the left, almost left forward line, just constantly that ball going across. And then the very last player that I think could end up being a real big winner here with Frank is Jed Spence. And one of the reasons that I think of that is that this is the best fullback we have defensively at the club, bar nobody. His one-on-one ability is very, very good. Obviously today he was dealing with Saka, and a lot of his best games have come against Mo Salah's, Saka's, that sort of the top level, because his one-on-one defending is superb. He's quick, he's strong. His positional sense in terms of when the ball's away from him, sometimes he can shut off. But when it's right directly in front of him, and as I said, the one-on-one situation is top drawer. So he's almost a defensive fullback And again, what we were saying is that in some of the friendlies, it seems to be one is almost a marauding wing back, and then the other one comes inside. So you've kind of got Udogie, who is more of a wing back. You've got Porro, who's more of a wing back. So if either of them are not playing and Spence comes in, I feel like we've probably got him playing in his best position, where it's defensive fullback almost.
Yeah, that's nice. And his another like age note there on Spence as well. He's going to turn 25 in 10 days' time, or about that. So like it's going to be a very big season for him, and that is probably the year you want him to see lock down the out of possession, lack of concentration, lapses, that sort of thing you were talking about. And if you can nail that down, then yeah, you have a very, very strong fullback.
Right, now moving on to the part that everybody wants to talk about, we are going to move on to the transfers that are required. There's been a couple of people that have mentioned it in the chat. I think it's because it's sort of the breaking news, but we'll start here just looking at, does Palhinha make sense when you have Basuma, Bentancur, Sarr, and what does that mean for Archie Gray? Well, I think the expectation is that the expectation is Basuma moves on, to be honest with you. That's the short and sweet of it. Everybody expects him to move on. Bentancur has been mentioned in interviews by Frank, so I would expect him to stay. Sarr, we just give reasons why we think that he should definitely be a member of the squad that you keep around. And then Archie Gray is a backup who could also potentially cover at right back, and he's a young player as well. So I think it just means Basuma goes out the door personally. Do you in agreement with that one?
I think you know better than me which player is going out of the club. I think you've got what you clearly lack Claire still, even with Palhinha, is a passer. So you kind of have an overload of profiles. I would expect one of Basuma or Bentancur to leave, and maybe that is Basuma. Yeah,
it's been very, very split, and most Spurs fans don't really. I don't think many have a preference. The only thing that I'm going off is that in Frank's first ever interview, he mentioned and name-checked Bentancur. He left out Son, but name-checked Bentancur. So for me, it'd be a weird one to name-check him in your first interview as manager and then ship him out the door. So that's not to say that's literally the only basis that I've got off of that. And I think Bentancur has started most of the friendlies and Basuma's come off the bench, but that's reading into it, I think, a bit too much, especially in a pre-season when fitness is obviously the key to it. Another thing about Palhinha will be crucial as pressure on defenders will go down and allows our midfielders to go forward. Roger, I completely understand where you're coming from with that. Palhinha, and I think you are in agreement with this because I think we spoke about him previously, but Palhinha for me wasn't the type that we needed. I think he'd be a good player and he'll improve us in areas that we need to be improved in. However, I would have preferred a more ball playing defensive midfielder because I think Frank will have us better defensively anyway. So we therefore didn't need that destroyer type. Caveat that by saying that I do think that he'll be a good signing. I think you mentioned it, or you just mentioned it just now as well. Would you have preferred Spurs to go down a more ball playing centre midfielder than a Palhinha?
Yeah, and it's someone would say you still can. Palhinha is only a loan option, right? And I don't think there's an option to buy either. So, hopefully there's still money left. But as I was just saying, I think a lot of Tottenham fans talk about wanting to find the perfect number 6, and that player just doesn't exist. Even in players, in Rodri it does. Other players you think it exists, it doesn't. I was on a stream yesterday, and they said about wouldn't Adam Wharton solve a lot of those problems? So I was like, probably not. He's like, he's more of an 8, and he's not someone you want as a 6. He's not got the defensive characteristics you want at all. So every player at the moment is going to have trade-offs. Palhinha is an example of that. As you've mentioned, he's very strong defensively, not particularly strong on the ball. And that's why Vincent Kompany benched him at Bayern. That's why he's leaving the club now, because he's surplus to requirements. So I think my view is Tottenham need ball progression from the middle of the pitch, and in order to get that, you're going to need, in my opinion, a 6 who specializes in that. And I think it's okay if they lack defensive muscle, let's say, because you've got Romero next to them, who's a very aggressive player, someone who can basically step into midfield and be a presence in that sense, and you've got Vadavan covering you behind. So if things go really wrong, then you've got a bit of a safety net. I think from a 6, you just want good defensive characteristics. So one player I picked was Angelo Stiller, but he's now, I think, got ligament damage, so probably off the market. But he's an example of one of the most progressive midfielders in Europe with his passing. gets around quite quickly off the ball, so good in that sense defensively, just not as strong as Palhinha in the air or on the ground. But I think that's the sort of player you want, maybe even paired with Palhinha. But I think just Palhinha doesn't really solve what seems to be your biggest problem.
Yeah, so again, going back to the whole Ange conversation, I think Palhinha worked perfectly for Ange because basically, Palhinha is not stepping over the halfway line. He would be another body in the midfield where essentially we only had 2 centre-backs. So he was making up them numbers, i.e. 2 centre-backs and the DM makes it 3. With Frank, we already have the 3 because we've got either one of the fullbacks are inverted, the 2 centre-backs are there as well. So there's your 3. So for me, the midfielder only has to kind of cover the space. He doesn't have to be an absolute monster in that space, if that makes sense. So I completely agree. And when you was going back to the perfect 6, for me now, especially like in Man City's, for instance, they might go and sign the perfect 6 because they've got the ability to, the money to, etc. Whereas for all the clubs that are further down, it's about the partnerships. So it could be that actually the 2 best players in central midfield actually doesn't work as a partnership, and you could get players that maybe are not as good but actually suit better. And I think that's key to what you're saying there about Walton. A lot of people seem to think that if you go and you spend the money on Walton, that the midfield is completely fixed. However, for me, it would still need him to have the right partner alongside him to be able for that to be a good midfield for the Premier League. So it's a bit of a strange one. I'm now going to tick Stiller off the list because he was on the list of players that we should be looking at. Your myth busting that you've done, as I say, I've got some players that are here. Stiller is obviously part of that. Who would be the one player that you really think we should be looking at in that position? Because the numbers are dwindling. They're getting lower and lower. They're getting harder to find these midfielders. They're either being bought, they're signing new contracts, etc. If you could get, because I think that's probably the area that most Spurs fans believe we need someone. If you've got one name that really sort of stands out for you.
I'm getting I had my phone up to try and look for players because off the top of my head, no. Stiller was
ones I've looked at. Lamine Camara, Believer, Stiller are the main ones that I see you've recently done myth busting on, and obviously that means that you've analysed them a bit more than your regular players. So none of them.
Kamara is another one where, like, a bit like Wharton, where defensively I do not trust him enough to play as a defensive midfielder for a different reason. I think Wharton's quite weak. Kamara's really slow. Yeah, and it is like he's a weird one in that sense because he can be a bit nippy over like the first couple of meters escaping pressure, but actually, to be fair, it might be a player I'm written against that. But yeah, it's just you watch him play and you think this is a very silky player, and then you kind of realize when it actually gets to like sprinting, he's quite slow. So I don't. And he's quite small as well. I think like 5'8" or something. So I would not trust him as a 6. Lucien Agume is like the only one I can think of, and he's one I did recently a thread on. But he's another very strong defensive player, very nice on the ball. But he's got good passing vision. But he's a project player, and his passing is quite bumpy, is the best way to put it. So, what you ideally want in a player, when they play a pass to you, right? If you think you're on the football pitch, you want that pass to be coming in crisp, rolling along the ground, and you can take one touch. You don't even need to take a touch, and you can keep going. Agume's passes often get this little kick and bounce into them, which means the person receiving them often has to take a couple of touches to bring it under control. So even when he spots someone in a good position, makes a good pass, it still can end up with his team losing the ball because of his technique. So that's something he needs to improve over the next couple of years or so. And that's the reason I don't think he's right for the 6th position.
I'll be honest, he was on the list, and then I thought I'm going to butcher his name, so I'm not even going to mention him. So, but you've said it there. You literally read my mind. So, big up Brian in the chat. Thanks for coming in, sir. Hope you're doing well. Palhinha is a loan, so we have money to go big on a striker. We are going to go into. So what I've done is I've essentially split up just a few players' names that I think that we need in positionally. So mainly a left centre back, left back cover. We need a central. I would argue potentially 2 central midfielders, one being more defensive and one being a bit more forward thinking, and then a winger / forward type. I did see recently that Ortega might be up for, City are obviously looking to get rid of him. He might be an option for Spurs with the conversations that we're having about Vicario. And then obviously Kinski was linked with a loan move to France. And obviously being 21, if he was to go over there to have a full year, we could potentially bring in Ortega as a option. Some would argue potentially he's a better fit for what Frank wants to do than Vicario at all. But I don't know whether you'd bring a lone keeper in for, say, 1 year, drop your number one, and then next year bring Vicario back in. That for me sounds like it'd be more like a long-term thing of kind of getting rid of Vicario. Let's just go through the chat. We'll have a couple of messages from the chat, and then we can kind of go through the defensive options and see where we're at. Gibbs White deal no more, unfortunately. You put it in. You put it in again, so we can go there. I'll add that again, as I said. Once we're starting defence, we'll move to midfield, and then we'll go to the more forward options of El Canous as well. Alex, we only have 7 homegrown. Yeah, so English players will become a factor, but specifically at Spurs right now, we need to improve our 11, and then we worry about the homegrowns by potentially being squad options. I think we can't just buy players just because they're homegrown if they're not good enough. However, some on this list are homegrown. I believe we go for a homegrown midfielder to give us the 8. It's definitely a possibility. It's definitely a possibility. Ravella is another player that we'll add in, and Hincapié as well. We'll add that in a sec. That time for me, otherwise I'm not too easy. Quality loans can be done. Well, the thing is that we need to be able to loan out and look at the EPL better for sure. The amount of players that have come through from that level is ridiculous. And what's quite funny is that we've quite regularly bought players from the same teams but bought different players. And then Walton, for instance, we went and signed Ashley Phillips. Ashley Phillips was hyped up to be a massive player in the future, but we should have also looked at Walton and thought he might become a decent player in the future. But that's typical Spurs. We are going to start from centre back, left back, that sort of area, because that's where Spurs seem to be lacking a lot currently right now. I don't know whether you know the ins and outs of the squad, but we've got Udogie's the only real left back with Ben Davies. Obviously Ben Davies, this is not one you want to be going into a Premier League with. He's currently the only fit left back. We have Van der Ven as a left centre back, and then all of the other options, although some can play left, they're all right footed. So it doesn't really give great balance. So this one for me, I think, is far-fetched on the basis that I can't see Spurs spending that amount for one player that may or may not be, I'm not saying he'll be a backup, but is he going to replace Van der Ven? I'm not so sure. Hincapié?
Yeah, I'm the same with you. I think he'd be a backup option. He's not strong enough to play as a centre back in a back two, and he's definitely not like progressing enough to play as a left back. I'd say I think he'd work quite well for that left back coming inside role, but way too expensive.
Mm-hmm. Completely agree. And you've just thrown it in the chat. This one for me, I understand why people like him, and I think he's a very, very good left back. But this is for me, when people are talking about bringing in Anthony Robinson, it's almost like you're starting with no squad and then you're picking him as the left back you want. But if you have Udogie, I don't see why you go and spend 40-50 million on a left back that is of his age. Why would he necessarily come? Because he knows he's going to have competition with Udogie. It, again, for me, doesn't really make sense. I understand the player is very good, but I don't see why he would come to Spurs or why Spurs would look at him.
Yeah,
What do you think on that one?
I think you've hit it nail on the head there. I think it's like, a left back of Spurs who would have been fun might have been Yoel Hatter, who's gone to Chelsea. Like that centre back who can play left back a bit better than Hincapié.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's gone to Chelsea.
I mentioned him on the last one we had, saying that I think we should just go all out for Hatter. I just think he's not at the required level right now, but give a year or two and the age that he's at, I actually think Chelsea have had Spurs' perfect window, because Hato would have been perfect. I think Xavi Simons would be perfect. And I also think João Pedro would have been perfect, because I think we need a versatile forward and he's able to play in a variety of positions. So, but I don't want to keep talking about Chelsea because they just seem that every single time I like a player, they sign him. A couple of left centre backs / left backs that I've kind of come up with recently. Gahey's been linked again all around to say that he's available for about £40 million. Still feels a little low. I know he's only got 1 year left on his contract, and he is a right-footed left centre back. But would you see him being a player that Spurs should be looking to pick up? Again, it's whether or not he wants to come and fight it out with Van der Ven, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's too big a player. I think you'd need to be looking lower, like between a Vukcevic and a Gahey. Gahey is someone who'd probably only come in if he wants to be a starter, and I don't know if he's good enough to start for Tottenham, to be honest. So,
yeah, I completely agree. I just think that that's a bit of a pipe dream. It's one that you can kind of think if we brought him in, maybe it changes and completely changes the tactic. Maybe we go with 3 centre halves. You could have Gay, Romero, and Van der Ven in there, and the wing backs become more wing backs. The other one is Van Hecke. He seems to now be available from Brighton. Wants to go play Champions League. Apparently, is not handed in a transfer request, but seems unhappy. Do you think that he's an option for Spurs?
Yeah, that would be fun. I really like Jan-Paul Van Hecke. I didn't see anything about that those stories. If that's true, then yeah, he'd be a great option. But I feel like Brighton would charge a very large fortune to try and take him.
No, from what I remember seeing, again, I can't remember the exact links. Let me just see if I can find it. But it wasn't huge. It wasn't a huge amount. I didn't save it. I'll have a little look while we're going through. But yeah, it was about the £40 million mark. I think it was 43 million, if I remember, was what they wanted. As I said, I can't remember the source personally, but
I feel like they want more from A. Was 23-year-old centre back starting every game last season.
Yeah, here we go. So it was a Brighton account actually put it up. So 43 million, 50 million euros. Seagulls are willing to make Van Hecke their highest paid player, but the defender's not interested. He dreams of playing in the Champions League and believes Brighton won't, and at Brighton that won't happen. So I think that would be a very, very good signing. And as you said, it would be a player that potentially would come in and not necessarily command a starting slot every single game. And then the other two, which I think are a higher level, Scalvini has obviously been linked all over the place and kind of can play in a variety of positions. I'm eager to know where do you think, or whether you do think he has a preferred position or where he will end up becoming, because some people are saying a 6, some people saying left centre back, some people saying left back.
I've actually not watched enough of Scalvini to comment on that, I'm afraid.
Fair enough. This is all we do it ad hoc, don't we? We just kind of make up names and see. And then the last one is the Belgian, the long-haired guy that played for not Leverkusen. Who is it?
Do you mean Arthur Tate?
Yes.
Yeah.
Petra or something. Yeah.
Yeah, Tate. It's Arthur Tate.
Yeah.
I know Nathan A. Clark likes him. Big Spurs guy. And I'm a bit less enthusiastic. I think he's that sort of player where I think he has a nice role as a left back who stays back as a centre back.
Yeah.
But it's a bit like Hincapié. If you were to change manager or change system, he could quickly become someone who's awkward to fit into your team because he's not strong enough to play as a centre back in the back four, which is why he's not playing there for Frankfurt. And he's not a very attacking left back. So if you wanted that sort of profile there, then you wouldn't play him. So he'd do the job at Tottenham. You'd probably do that fee for cheap, but he does have limits positionally.
Yeah. I completely agree on that. And thinking about it, Spurs are very, very good at bringing in a manager and then completely changing how they want to play and what system they want to use. So making loads of players obsolete. We're very, very good at that. Hence why we have two wing backs in a fullback system. Simeone brought in Bayern and Almada for a combined fee less than Gibbs White buyout clause. Yeah, the problem with this is that it's always cheaper to go abroad, but you have to have your homegrown players and your English players, and you pay an English tax on them, unfortunately. And obviously they are slightly different positions. I'd say my guess is that Gibbs White would have probably played deeper for Spurs. He would have probably played alongside a Palhinha potentially, as opposed to being the out and out 10 on his own. He would have potentially played there on occasions, but I don't know how often he would have been there. So that's the kind of defensive sort of options that I think kind of spring to mind. The ones that seem to be in there are a couple more in the chat. Is he still at Brighton?
Yeah, he is. I think he'll get more minutes next season, Kadoglu, because Brighton have sold it, Pervis Estupinan.
Yeah, he seemed to not play as often as from what I could remember about him. Hickey's the best option, can play left back, right back, really well known for Frank. Yeah, I actually thought Frank wouldn't go in for Brentford players, but we've been, I don't know whether it's just lazy journalism, but we've been linked to quite a few of their players. What do you have any thoughts on Hickey as being as a left back?
Hickey hasn't played in about 3 years because he's just got 2 destroyed legs.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, so that would be a big no for me.
Where else can we go? So we spoke about it again previously. Douglas Luiz, João Gomez, Believer, they're all names that have potentially been linked as well. Any of them that really kind of stand out?
I mean, Baleba's too expensive. The first guy you mentioned, I've already forgot because I was thinking not strong enough. But João Gomes of Wolves, I do quite like. I think the last time I was asked about these two, I said I need these two. By him, I mean him and Andre at Wolves. I need to properly watch both of them because they very much blur together in my head. Two very technical, good Brazilian midfielders at Wolves. But they do. Every time I've seen them, they've always impressed me. So that's the sort of player I'd be tempted towards.
And then there has been some rumours recently about Paqueta leaving West Ham. He would obviously not be your deep midfielder, but in terms of potentially replacing a Morgan Gibbs-White, is that a player that you think would potentially come in as a good option for Spurs?
Yeah, I really like Paqueta. When he's on form, he's one of my favourite midfielders. When he was at Lyon, he played as more of a not 6 role, but like a more box to box 8. Whereas at West Ham, he's often been a 10 and then dropping back to help him build up. So I think he's even more versatile than Morgan Gibbs-White, to be honest. It all just comes down to me of how he deals with he's being cleared of the gambling allegations.
It was cleared today. I think West Ham released a statement. So
the thing I just want to see is how he gets on, how he starts the season, because I remember he seemed really off last season and it seemed to be really getting to him. So I just want to see how he starts next season. Hopefully he's the same player because at his best, he's one of my favourite in the world. Yeah,
I really like him. When I see the links, I think the price that was brought out was far lower than what they would expect. I think it was 35 million. So I think it's far lower than what West Ham would take. But if he's around that sort of mark, then I think Spurs should absolutely be going for him. What we're going to do, because I think we're going to round it off in the next 10 or so minutes, we'll just go. I've got a few names that I just want to rattle through, and then we'll go again to the chat. There is one that was brought up that's also on my list. We've got Sudakov from Donetsk.
He's on my list. Sudakov. I cannot comment on him yet, so I'll keep an eye on my page, and eventually I'll get to him.
There. So, guys, if you haven't already, the links in the description, the TikTok and also the X account for Alex. Please go drop him a follow. I'm constantly looking up. He's myth busting threads and things like that around players. So make sure you're doing that. El Canus is a new one that's been banded around. £22 million release clause. No one seems to have triggered it yet. So some Spurs fans are saying, well, if no one else has, he's probably not good enough. What are your thoughts on him?
He's someone who I don't think is ready to start every week for Spurs. He's a really strong passer, and my main problems with him too. One's quite niche. It's scanning. He's someone who doesn't check his shoulders often enough, so he often slows games down because he's very unaware of what's going on. If he was scanned a bit more, he'd be a bit more aware and could play passes a bit quicker. So that's something he needs to work on. The other thing is he's one of the worst shooters I've seen in a very long time. Going through all of his shots he took last season, and honestly the year before, I think when he was Genko, correct myself. Yeah, it's so many just goes miles off target. So he's got a long way to go in terms of his shooting. I do recommend him as like a purchase, but only as like a backup and someone you're investing in to improve, like so he becomes a starter in like 2-3 years time.
Almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Then who else have we got? Hayden Hackney. Much Championship football, Hayden Hackney.
Hey, Championship football is out of my remit. I do apologise. Although I was going to say a lot of people I trust are very down on Hayden Hackney. Apparently, he's quite overhyped. That's just parroting others.
I do completely agree. I think that the latest rumours are the fact he's going to go to, I can't remember the exact name of it, but he's going to another Championship club. And I was going, well, if he's that good, then obviously surely Prem teams, and it was about 15-20 million. So if Prem teams were interested, you would expect them to go there. A couple of names that are in the chat. One I really wanted to go to, and I'm really glad that you've already mentioned his team, Nico Paz.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, I really like him. He's great. He's been a joy to watch at Como, especially about 22 games into their season so far. So like just over halfway, and he's matured a lot in his final ball, but he's such a strong player. Like he's really reminiscent of De Bruyne actually. Now I'm being asked, like trying to describe him, like technically really good, but also just a bully on the pitch.
Really?
Especially for his age. He's 19 last season. I'm not sure if he's turned 20 now, but yeah, crazy talent. The only issue is with Como. While they may look like a mid-table Serie A team, and it might seem easy to get players out from there, I think they are the richest club in Italy, and I believe they're able to pay very nice, high wages. They're also I think they're also in a really nice part of Italy. So players like to go there because it's just a nice place to live. You get to play Italian football at an upstart club that are climbing their way to European football, playing under Cesc Fabregas, who's a pretty good coach. In a lovely part of the world and getting paid a lot more than you would at other teams. So it might be tricky to get Nico Paz out of there. Maybe if Como struggle next season, that provides an opportunity. Yeah,
I completely agree. From what I've seen, I've not seen a whole heap of him, but from what I've seen, very exciting. And it seems that Como are making signings left, right and centre. So I had a feeling that there was a little bit more to that story than a team that's just come up or a team that's quite low down. So, again, Dennis Serkin will be a Championship player. Any thoughts on him? We can kind of quickly skip. I don't see him coming in as other than because he's a club trained player.
Yeah, I don't know who he is.
Yeah, Sunderland left back, decent player, but nothing great. James McAtee, Harvey Elliott.
I think McAtee is like a nice player from watching him last season, and I tend to rate any City product highly, especially those that Pep Guardiola has like shown a likeness to. And it does seem like he's going to push a move out. So they kind of like that move, to be honest. That's quite a nice suggestion.
I really like him, and Harvey Elliott was one that really came out quite quickly on saying, because I think it was accepted that he wouldn't be a squad player anymore and wanted to leave Liverpool. And I was saying McAtee's the one I would pick out of him. So I think he'll be nearly half the price. And I think McAtee could end up being, as you said, if he's coming from the Guardiola school, then he must have something about him. So completely agree. And then one that has really been banded around probably over the last 24, 48 hours is Kiliman Njai from Everton. Could end up being a very, very good player if he get the consistency, potentially the players around him as well. Could you see a move for Spurs with Kudus on one side and Njai on the other?
That would be fun. I really like Njai too, to be clear. I feel like Everton, they've got new owners. They're probably going to try their best to keep hold of these players. And I also think as like a side point, Everton are going to be a team to watch next season. David Moyes has these cycles. What he'll do is when he's in his first season at a club, first couple of seasons, he seems to catch a lot of teams off guard because he's been at West Ham. And West Ham were massive, like tipped relegation in his first full season. And then he exploded and took everyone off guard. Over the course of his second season, teams started to pick up on him. This form trailed off. By his third season, teams were like knew what to expect and like were low blocking the low block team. And West Ham really struggled. And they still got that Conference League win, which papered over those cracks. So I think David Moyes at Everton, he's in ripe territory for first season David Moyes, like top 8 challenge, season surprise, and Njai is probably going to be a big part of that.
New stadium bounce as well, going into the new stadium is another factor that sometimes just gives a bit of extra sort of feeling, specifically at the start of the season, and then once you've got some momentum, it kind of goes on from there. And then the last player that I could just think of is Ademola Lookman. Obviously been linked to Inter Milan. Apparently they're not going to get over the line. Oh, and then the other player, Jashari. Have you seen anything of Arden Jashari from Club Bruges? I think.
Yeah, I know the name, but I've not seen much of him. Lookman I've seen a lot of, and yeah, Atalanta. I mean, they've got Ivan Juric in charge, who just got relegated to Southampton. So I feel like Lookman is probably like thinking time to leave and get out. I wouldn't blame him if he was. And
I couldn't believe that when it came up, I was like, that's obviously not the guy that's got relegated from. Oh no, it is the guy that got relegated from Southampton. How has he got that job?
He was very good in Serie A, to be fair. I think nobody was keeping Southampton up last season. Like genuinely nobody. But yeah, Lookman feels like just a grade below Xavi Simons, which I think is good for Tottenham because it means you could probably he's a bit more gettable. So that's another name to maybe keep an eye on.
Yeah. That's all the names really that I can think of. That there was Moani in there, but however, it looks like he's sort of agreed now to stay at Juventus, so he's kind of off the list. And that's sort of it. Simons was one, but obviously he looks like he's going to be sort of nailed on for Chelsea now. Was there any other players that you would suggest that Spurs should kind of look at, that should keep an eye on potentially, maybe even not just in this window, maybe in like a year's time, like Paz, for instance, who we've discussed?
Oh, that's a good question. Trying to think of other players that might be nice as well. Calawendo is one. I know you've been linked with him, and I quite like. I quite like the look of him. He's another player who, a bit like Kudus, is someone who makes teams attack quickly, and feels like he'd be a nice, valuable player there. I'd to leave you with like a note on him. I'd say he's the French Lautaro Martinez. Looks quite small, but he's really good at hold up play and back to goal play. Just like one of those really bite-sized, strong players. So looks can be deceiving with him.
We've got some history with Martinez. We've had deals done and signed, agreed, and everything, and then it's come at the last minute where we haven't got him over the line. So, and then one that I did miss on the myth busting, and again, you might not feel that he'll be a good fit, but Garnacho for Spurs. What are your thoughts on that?
I think he's massively underrated, Garnacho. But I feel like just quickly, like you've kind of already got that sort of player in Oliver, and you wouldn't really need Garnacho.
Yeah. All right, then, guys, that's it from us. We're going to finish it up there. I am going to redirect you over to Too Much of E. So we're going to go in there and smash a Spotlight on Spurs raid to E. So it'd be great if you can follow us over there. I will be in the chat as well. As I always say, guys, if you can please like the video, if you can sub to the channel, and then Alex's links are in the description as well. Please go and show him some love, and obviously follow him for all of the great content. And I'm sure he'll be bringing out loads more Mythbusters and players that Spurs should be looking at that will be coming up shortly. So big up to everyone. Thank you for coming in. Thank you, obviously, to Alex for coming on again. And last thing, as always, from me, come on, you Spurs. See you later, guys.